Sanju, welcome to People in Legal. How you doing,
Thank you,
my friend?
man. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. How is it in your part of the world today?
Oh, it's beautiful. A deer just came up and ate some corn in the morning that I left for the squirrels. It was very nice.
I'm so jealous. You have moved around all these exciting places, and we'll get into that as we go through this podcast today. Um, I was trying to think about when we met. I know it was an LMA event, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it was,
It
but
was in Boston.
it was in Boston. That's right. A good
Yeah,
number of years ago now.
quite a long time, maybe 6 years back or something.
6 years ago. Well, it's great to have you on the show today. And I'm really excited to talk to you. I mean, you and I talk a lot. We have lots of great conversations. And I think there's just some fantastic pearls of wisdom that the audience can take away from hearing some of your adventures and your stories. And maybe you could start by giving just a brief overview of kind of how you got started in legal and some of the journey that you went on.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Andrew, the first thing I wanted to say was when we met one another, we liked each other right away. I mean, it didn't take a long time. No one introduced us. No one
Nope.
said, you should meet Sanju, you should meet Andrew. We didn't really want anything from one another. You were a vendor. I was working at a law firm at the time, but we just liked each other right away. And I think that that's something I want to start with more than anything, even before myself. And that is that I think I learned from a gentleman named Chris DeSantis that we, when we meet people, we think about two things. We think about their competence and their warmth. That's it. And we think, do I like this person? And can I trust this person? And I think that like right away, I liked you. And then soon thereafter, we thought, well, I can trust this person. And we've had a lot of fun together. We've had more fun together than anything else, really. So,
Right.
and I guess that's a big part of my story in legal too, is just that I've always wanted to have fun doing what I do. And so I took a normal kind of immigrant route, I guess. I was born in India, grew up in the States, in New York, LA, in the Bay Area. And going to law school was just kind of just a, I just kind of fell into it. I didn't really think about it a lot, honestly. I thought law school was going to be the graduate school of everything, and I'd learn all this stuff. And I honestly, I found law school to be stultifyingly boring, and I was really disappointed during my first year, like what we were doing, reading all these cases and reading these dissents. I just thought it was super dull. And that's why I didn't become a litigator. I became a corporate lawyer so I could just work with people and do deals. But I just kind of fell into legal and I just did it. And it seemed like interesting job where you can be part of something without taking a lot of risk. And I know that sounds strange, but a lot of lawyers aren't really entrepreneurial. And I think that when I was younger, I wasn't as entrepreneurial or as into risk as I am now. And so it was just something where you could go get a pretty good job and you could just kind of learn things and you could learn about different businesses. And it's just a kind of in a lot of ways, it's a very easy road. And so that's probably why I did it.
Yeah. And what was so you talk about corporate, what were the sort of things that you got involved in your legal practice?
Yeah, most of it was transactional work. And really the work I got to do was really a product of the people who mentored me and trusted me and brought me into transactions. So it was all kinds of buying and selling companies, taking businesses abroad, private, helping people with public offerings, different kinds of debt offerings, different kinds of transactions. So really what I learned really early on was how to be an advocate of the deal, really in a way so that I learned how to help my client and the other folks that were buying, selling, doing whatever, get the thing done in a way that made sense for my client, of course. So I was always an advocate for the deal. And sometimes deals didn't work out, as you know, sometimes they don't. And other times they did. And I was always trying to be very positive and help things happen. So that's kind of what I did. I just did a lot of transactional work. I started by being a specialist in learning how to staple and make copies. And then I went on from there to doing other things.
Hey, you got to start at the bottom, right?
I
But
was great at that.
it's interesting though, because there's a couple of things there. So the first thing that you said was about how you got involved in those transactions. And I guess as an associate coming in, you talked right at the beginning about relationship building. And I think often when we talk to lawyers about sort of business development, we think very much about that external relationship. How do you build relationships with your clients? But I think your point there is actually you also have to learn how to build relationships internally to get involved in the work as it's coming in, particularly as an associate, right? But even as you become a partner, get involved in the bigger deals that sit cross practice and those sorts of things. What were some of the things that you did as an associate to start building that reputation and sort of engendering those relationships, I guess?
Yeah, let me give you an example, just one example of something I did when I moved from New York City to Portland, Oregon to start working as an associate at Stoll Reeves. I'd finished 2 years in New York City. So I arrived in this new city. I had an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, about 4 or 5 blocks away from the firm. And I was on this 26th floor of this firm. And there were, all these lawyers and all the staff and whatnot. And after I'd been there a few weeks, I said, you know what? The following Friday evening, I'm going to have a party at my house for everybody on the 26th floor, including whoever they want to bring to my place. So from the person who made copies, or a secretary, to the most important partner that was scary, they could bring whomever, and I was going to have a keg of beer, some food I ordered, some sandwiches or whatever, whatever I could get, and soft drinks and whatnot, and said, "Yep, we're going to have this party at 6 o'clock at my house." And people just thought that was the strangest thing because I'd only been in town a short time. I'm having this party. It's a party that doesn't have any status related to it. It's like everybody, well, on 26. It would be tough for me to have 7 floors come to my apartment. So I just said my floor. And virtually everybody came. And the party went on till 2 in the morning. And people had a great time. And we finished the keg that I'd gotten from Widmer Brewing, And so people had so much fun. And that was a way to create relationships there. And other people were like, wow, we've been here 15 years. How come we've never done this at our own home? We've done things where people are told there's a summer associate event or they're made to do something, but how come we didn't do this? So it's just about getting out there and doing that kind of thing. Now, I mentioned everyone being invited because it was like some of the people there said, this is the kind of behavior we want to inculcate at the firm where everyone's included and has a good time. And it was a good time. So that was a great way to get started for me at Stoll Reeves. And there were a number of things like that I would do when I was in New York and that I've done till today, really.
Yeah. It's really interesting when we were talking in preparation for this. You talked about how you become comfortable to do those sorts of things. And I think there are some people who naturally engage in that way, right? They're very outgoing. They find it easy to connect with people and build relationships and open up their home. That's something that they just, comes naturally to them. And other people really struggle with it for a whole variety of reasons. And one of the things that you talked about was becoming comfortable in yourself and who you are, and the strength that gave you to then go and do some of these things and without worry, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be true to yourself. So it's so easy to proffer guidance about do this, do that. And there's really no, everyone's got to do what is great for them. Someone might want to start a book club. Someone might say, I'll start a book club with 15 people on my floor and get to know each other because I like to read. I like to understand what people think. I would hate to start a book club. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to sit and read a book, listen to what you have to say about it. What I just not interested, And so I would never do that. And so it's like, and if someone invited me to a book club, I'd say, no, thanks. I don't want to go, because I just am not into it. So being true to what you're about is really important. Like, for example, I never learned to play golf, even though some folks said to me, hey, it'd be good if you played golf and joined this club and we can get you into this club because you can hang out with clients and do this. I said, I just don't want to do that. I'm just not interested in hitting this ball into this hole and walking around. I said, I'll meet you after you're done or whatever. I'll bring the wine and we can talk later, but I'm just not into it. So it's that freedom to just do what works for you.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I think I sort of feel like it applies to the work that you do as well. And again, we talked about this before. There's just work you have to do, right? As a
Yes.
lawyer, particularly as you're coming up, right? You don't really get a lot of choice. But often you hear partners talking about the fact that, they're kind of stuck doing this work and they don't necessarily want to do it. They would like to be able to do some of this other stuff. And it feels to me, and I'm sure you have a perspective on this, that as you build the roots of who you are as an associate and as you grow into a partner, it becomes easier to say, do you know what? I don't want to do work with Chevron. I want to go do work with organizations that care about the environment and the planet and those sorts of things, right? But you have to build that confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a balance, of course. I mean, there's certain things that, you know, a lot of legal work is just, it's stuff you just need to do. Reading a 300 page indenture isn't fun for anyone, you know, but there's things you just need to get done. And, you know, I was working obviously in transactional work in the 80s and 90s before AI, and you couldn't just ask something to look for certain words, you know, in a document that easily. It was all just, you know, grinding through different stuff. And, you know, I had a partner that was very funny where he would want to make sure we looked at certain things. So he would put on the 200th page of a document, "Hi, Sanju," just so he made sure you read that. Then he'd ask you, "Where was that?" You know, and so you'd be flipping through trying to find it. Sometimes I hadn't read everything and I was trying to find the damn thing, but it's not easy. So, you know, but I think you just have, there's a lot of work you just kind of have to just deal with and do. And then sometimes you're working with people that you're not thrilled about the product, or you're not thrilled about, you know, what they do, but that's part of being a lawyer. A lawyer optimizes trust. And so you help that person get things done. If you want to go do something different, there's the door, go do that. You don't have to be at a firm. There's many, many cool things for lawyers to do, including not practice law. So, you
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a minute because
know.
love that bit of your career. But you raise a really interesting point, right? The sort of massive influx of AI and large language models and all those sorts of things. And one of the questions that it brings up is, how do associates learn, right, in this new world? And I can imagine, you know, paging through those 300 pages of documentation, whilst tiresome, you learn a lot, right? Because you're just consuming a lot of information that in today's world, you don't get the opportunity to do in theory, right? Because AI is going to take that all away from you. What do you think about that as somebody who, as you say, grew up in an age where there wasn't AI? What impact do you think that's going to have on the next generation of partners, if you like?
I think it's very, I think you hit on something very important that's been happening for the last few decades, really, even before AI, and that is that the training of the younger person or the associate is a lot different today, and there's things are coming at younger lawyers a lot faster than we had them coming at us, and so people have less time today. Partners want to make more. There's more screens open. There's more stuff happening, and people are expected to figure things out on their own much more quickly than we ever had to. I remember when I took my first job at a New York City law firm starting in '86, and I'd agreed to that job, and the salary was $49,000 for a year. I was thrilled because I was 24 and I was going to live in New York City, and I was making $49,000 and all that. And I, right before I was going to start, they said, "Oh, you know, we're bumping the salary to 65,000 because Cravath had made that big bump there, and our firm wanted to, you know, stick with the big firms and do that." Okay, fair enough. So I thought, whoa, they're going to pay me $65,000 for the same job. What's going to change exactly? And so I went to them and I said, "Hey, I was wondering, can I just not take that and just stick at 49 and get what you were going to give me before, including time to go over stuff and also the hours expectations?" And they said, "No, we can't do that. That's illegal. You know, everyone has to be paid the same." And I said, "Oh, okay." Well, it changed everything because 65 was the first year salary, and I think it was 78 was the second year salary and all of that. And expectations changed. And so people started working more. Partners had less time for you. And that's only gotten much more from '86 to now. Just think about that. And so I think the big problem isn't even AI, it's people wanting too much, compensation that's too high. People are filling their bowls, so they're overflowing. And when a bowl overflows, you don't get that stuff anyway. But partners don't seem to care. They just want more and more. And they have less time for associates. So I think people should think more about spending time on training, helping people become better lawyers, investing in those people for the future. That's really important to me.
It's a really that's a really interesting point, and we could totally go down a rabbit hole on that one. But I want to bring you
Hmm.
back to something you were talking about, focusing on the deal and the client, and I want to touch on your focus on the client. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past is some of the things that you did when you took on a new client. And one of the stories I really like was the organization that ran daycare centers. And talk to us about what you did when you brought them on board, because I think that's such a great story of really ingratiating yourself to the client, demonstrating like how I guess interested in their business you were, but then also what using what you learned to then communicate to them.
Right. Like, so for example, with that client, I went to see a bunch of their daycares and see what happens during the day there and observed how things work with the clients, with the parents, with the children, just see how they do things. And then they had certain communication tools that they used for their parents about how their kids were doing, how the process is going. And I said, they had these kind of reports and these communication tools. What if we use the same verbiage and the same tools when we talk to them about how our relationship is going? That's what they're used to giving their customer, and they like it and they developed it. Why don't we talk to them about how we're doing with that same language and create that same dialogue with them, and help our people learn the way they speak? Because we've talked about this. Sometimes the lawyer is providing something that's not helpful for the in-house counsel when they have to go speak to the actual customer, which is the leadership. And so how do you put it in their words? How do you help them with that decision, and let them figure things out based upon information you're given to them their way?
Yeah. And it's I mean, as I'm sure you have, I've sat in many sessions at events of there's always a GC panel, right, where you have a
Hmm.
collection of GCs from various different industries talking about their experience, right, of working with law firms. And I accidentally said this in public just before a panel was about was about to go speak. And I said, I've sat in these for 10 years and nothing's changed. And that's
Yeah.
no disrespect to the GCs, right? But that is disrespect to the law firms, because the GCs keep asking for law firms to engage in a different way. And this topic that you've pulled out here is a really important one, because it's generally one of the things that come up. Stop giving us advice in legal language. Help us be able to take that and give that to our chief exec, and our chief exec be able to know, what's going on. And I remember in one of the panels I sat in, the GC said every single piece of legal advice I get, I basically have to translate for the chief exec because it's not usable in that form. Why do you think why do you think legal doesn't change in that regard?
Well, here's an interesting thing. I think if you think about your career in legal and my career in legal and the changes that have occurred, the way law firms, let's say, have improved over the last many decades towards the client, there's a long hill to climb. But where they've come to, they haven't come to any of those things on their own. They haven't come to any of those things, not one law firm, where they've sat around and said, we would like to do this on behalf of our client to make their life easier. They're made to do those things by consultants, by competitors, or by clients. So that
Mm.
really makes you think, what is it that's in that legal mind? If they could get away just doing what they normally do and getting paid the same, you know what, they would. They're not really into innovation per se. They're not an Amazon where they sit around and talk about improvement, improvement, improvement. They're just not. They're into the way things are, and they begrudgingly, all law firms begrudgingly go into what they have to do, what they're made to do.
Yeah,
That's the sad truth, I think. And that's why
yeah,
consultants today every year tell the law firms the same thing over and over again. They don't tell them anything new either because they
yeah,
haven't really gotten there yet.
yeah. Do you think, I mean, we on the other side of the house, so us in technology land for law
Mm,
firms, we've talked for almost decades at this point about, changes coming and law firms will have to change. And then we just watch the profits get bigger and bigger and bigger every year. But it feels like we've reached a point where actually things are changing, and I think large language. I don't think that's the ultimate thing that's going to change it, but it's prompted people to start thinking about the service that they deliver in a different way. Whether large language will form a huge part of that or not remains to be seen. But that combined with decreasing budgets, alternative, sort of legal providers that we're now starting to see in the marketplace, there is a competitive edge that's now coming. Do you think we've reached that point where partners are going to have to rethink how they engage with clients?
I think so, but I think when you say partner, are you talking about a 61-year-old partner or a 41-year-old partner? Because the 41-year-old partner is going to use Databall, your company, to get things done and get clients and be successful. The 61-year-old partner will come to a meeting and say, sure, blah, 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 but they're like out in 5 years. And they don't own anything in the company after they leave, typically. It's just they're done, you know? And so a lot of people talk about their legacy and whatnot, but they don't really want to embrace technology unless they have to, by and large. So the incentives within the partnership are different, and what a partner is different. I think you're right. I think that thing is coming, but we said that 5 years ago that it was coming. Now, if legal is 1 trillion or 800, 900, whatever it is today in the US, and you say, okay, in 5 years, it's going to be 1.4 trillion. Well, then something is wrong, because if the systems are working, what we should do is say legal is going to be, it's 1 trillion. It's going to go down to 600 billion because there's efficiencies and systems that are going to improve it. That's what happens with television sets. Television sets that are better become cheaper. They don't become more expensive. But in legal, something is wrong. Something is definitely wrong. And you know, if we're spending more and more on the same stuff and we have all these tools, then what's going on?
It's interesting. I was talking to a group of general counsel at a round table in Chicago a couple of almost 12 months ago now at this point, and we were talking about actually dispute resolution. And one of the topics that we were talking about was the use of mediation in the context of corporate disputes. And I went around the group and said, you know, who's using mediation? How do you make the decision to use mediation as opposed to arbitration or litigation? And they said, actually, it's really challenging because the law firm's never going to recommend it, right? Because they make less money if you mediate, in theory. And so one of the things that they really struggled with was that there just wasn't enough information. There wasn't enough data to help them make a decision that says, do you know what, in this case, if we don't arbitrate or litigate, we can probably get to an outcome and it's going to save us, you know, a third of the cost that it would otherwise, right? And so there is this little moat that law firms have around the industry a little bit that means that it is hard for things to change. And to your point, we keep thinking that's going to break, but it doesn't really. It just keeps on perpetuating.
Yeah, and the incentive also, like for a general counsel, if somebody says this is a really important situation and you need to win, well, then you're going to go hire a lawyer that costs $1,500 an hour right now and not think anything about it, you know, and be like, yep, my boss told me that we're going to go win and we're going to do such and such. You may be able to solve the problem for a lot less by having a 3-hour conversation. But sometimes people say, you know, they don't even mind Pyrrhic victories where they feel like, oh, you know, we both suffered and great. You know, you see large tech companies fight and you look at their legal bills and you're like, what's going on? They don't mind some of these sometimes, you know, and they it's just part of their business in dealing with their competitors as well. So there's a lot out there that's kind of going on that sometimes we think, how is this happening? But honestly, there's too much legal spend in the US and there are too many lawyers in the US. That's the truth. And those lawyers all want to find something to do. And so they make legal work because that's what they do.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you were a partner at Stoll Reeves and living a great life as a senior lawyer, doing corporate work, all of that good stuff. And then you threw it all away. Tell me about what was going through your mind when you decided to walk away from the partnership, and tell us what you went and did for 4 years.
Yeah, so really what was going through my mind was, would I have the chance to sit here today and have a set of wonderful memories that I could look back upon and say I did everything I wanted to do in my brief time in this universe, in this manifestation. And so I was a little less than 40 I'm 62 now. I was sitting in an office and I saw 25 lucite cubes there with all the deals I'd done. And I thought, wow, I'm about to be 40 and there's probably going to be 25 or 30 more of these in my office when I'm done at 60 something or whatever it is. And is that something I really want to do, or should I go try and do something different? So I said, you know what, I'll go try and do something different. So I, resigned from the partnership and I went and opened a nightclub. And I always loved going out. And I always thought, how does it happen that people go out to great nightclubs and dance clubs? And what's behind all of it? And so I had the opportunity to do that. And I opened a nightclub and with vinyl and great DJs from all over the world in Portland, Oregon, a tiny little nightclub and with just 5 staff. And we had a ball for those 4 years that you mentioned, and it was a great experience being a small business owner, learning to live on 20% of my former income and just enjoy the whole process. I loved it. And today, at 62, it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because when I walk around Portland, I don't live in Portland anymore. When I walk around Portland, I still run into people to talk about the 1201 that I used to own. And it was such a beloved place that it's in people's love and memory and heart. It'll always be there. And for me too. So today I could say, wow, I'm so happy I took that side road for a while rather than just accumulate lucite cubes and more money.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's still, there's still customers, right? They're different types of customers. I guess, what did you take with you from being a partner in a law firm into this whole world of consumers? And what did you learn, like in terms of building relationships and managing clients? What else did you learn on top of what you'd already learned as being a partner in a law firm?
Well, one of the things that was funny was kind of like that old TV show Cheers, which some of the older people will remember. A lot of our customers, 85% of our business was just regulars. So we were in a situation where we focused on giving our regulars a great product and having a great time. So we didn't worry about things like marketing. We didn't have a website. I just had gotten a cell phone when I first opened the nightclub. And so it was like just that was in 2002. And I was forced into getting a cell phone because, the guy who sold me the club, who owned it prior, and I was going to remodel it and do all stuff. He said, if something happens at night, like a fire or something, I'm going to call you. You better have this available all the time. And I thought, oh, okay. And I realized I had the keys to the business in my pocket and it's my responsibility. At a law firm, you can always call somebody and say, my chair is broken. Can you get me a new one? Here, I had to put duct tape on my chair if it was broken, right? And so it was learning that you focus on the people that matter, and you don't have to worry about all the other people. People would come in and say, you should do this. You should change the art in here every month. I only had one piece of art in there that I love. I still have it. It's actually sitting in my living room now. But or they said you should take branded material that liquor companies give you so that would help you with your costs. And I would say, what you should do is you should buy a nightclub and open a nightclub if that's what you want to do. I want to have a high pour cost, 32% instead of industry 18%, meaning I spent 32% on the liquor that I served people. So that people came and they said, wow, I got this for $5. I never changed my prices in 4 years. I did things so that the business was happy, it was fun. And what we wanted to sell was a great experience, a great night out, great music, great DJs. And you made that money by selling liquor. And so that was the reality of it. But I took the ATM machine that was in my club out of my club when I bought it, because I told the Coke dealers, you can go somewhere else and deal Coke. It's not going to happen in my club. If people want to do drugs and go out, that's their business. But I made it the way I wanted it and I lived it that way. And so if certain people didn't want to come, I didn't have a happy hour, for example. People said, you should have a happy hour. I said, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I just don't want. So you just choose what you want to do your thing, and then be happy with it. That's how I've lived my whole life. And I think we all can live that way.
It's really interesting, though, because a moment ago you talked about how law firms change driven by what other people ask them to do, by the expectations, right, that are set upon them. And I really like this idea of you saying, no, this is how I'm going to run my business. If you want something different, there are other people that you can do that you can go and you can have that experience if that's what you want. The same principles actually apply to law firms. And it's really interesting as you as you go around and you look at how the market is changing, and as I think you know, the legislation changed in the UK, and it allowed business owners to go and own law firms. Um,
Exactly.
and there's a couple of really interesting firms. So there's one called Knights and there's another called Setfords, and they have basically built their firms by saying, do you know what? We're going to take all of the political partner stuff away from lawyers, and we're just going to allow them to be lawyers. And they don't have to worry about the business. They don't have to worry about the operations. That's all going to be taken care of for them. And they can just go deliver great experience, right? And one of those firms over the last 12 years has risen massively in the rankings because guess what? You're providing a great experience at a reasonable price. You're
Mm.
applying business logic to how you manage relationships, how you engage them, how you check in. Let's do quarterly reviews. Let's do post-matter reviews and make sure we're delivering a great service, right? And I think as we look forwards in the legal industry, the firms who do start to step out and say, I'm not going to be driven by the behaviors of the people around me. I'm just going to go deliver great experience. I think in this world that we're now moving into where relationship is becoming critical, not firm brand, I think that's going to be huge, right?
Absolutely. That is it. That's it right there. And in fact, interestingly, when I first started at Stoll Reeves, there was a gentleman named Henry Hewitt, and he was a partner there that was one of my mentors and just taught me a lot about people and legal services. And I asked him about success early on, and I was thinking he was going to tell me to read something or work on this kind of transaction. And he just said to me, he said, relationships, relationships, relationships. That's what he said. And I was like, wow, that's great. It's how you understand a person and what you understand about a person. Relationships, relationships, relationships. That's it. The law is, I mean, the legal work, supposedly it's going to get easy for a computer to do everything and think about everything and figure this stuff out, or most of it anyway. So it's really about the person who helps you translate what the legal guidance is and helps you or is available for you when you need that person, or somebody you can count on, or somebody who looks around the corner for you, who really helps you succeed. That's a relationship based thing. Relationships are also just little things you hear, just we spent very little time preparing for this podcast. Why? Because you and I are able to wing a lot of things. We did prepare a little bit. We talked. We could have just said, let's just do this. I would have been fine with that. But we said, let's just talk a little bit. Well, I had mentioned that I'd been at the Art Institute recently and I'd seen a Georgia O'Keeffe show. And you had said, oh, my wife, your wife, loves Georgia O'Keeffe. Now, that's something like I'll keep in my mind, because I will send you one day a Georgia O'Keeffe card. And I'll say thank you, or I'll send you a note saying hi or whatever. And that card will connect to our friendship. And you'll probably show that card to your wife and say, hey, remember this guy I know? Oh, look, that's relationship building. It's keeping track of little things that have nothing to do with the legal product. People want to buy everything. They don't want to buy just the document. Nobody cares about the document. They want to care about everything else.
Yeah. So you did your stint at running a nightclub, and there are so many stories that we probably couldn't repeat on this podcast.
Definitely not, yeah.
Of doing that, but you then made the decision to go back into legal, but in a different capacity. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I was actually, when I first returned from, when I first went from the nightclub world back into law, I went back to Stoll Reeves. And one of the things funny about Stoll Reeves and me is that, as terms of relationships, in my career, I've been to Stoll Reeves 5 times. So you can come and go out of an organization. I've worked at competitors of Stoll Reeves. I've been a consultant. I've done my own thing. And so if you have a reasonable relationship, there are times when you can connect and reconnect with an organization. You never have to change. But I went back in kind of a legal capacity. And then I got an opportunity to be a director of business development at a competitor. And I went to Stoll Reeves and said, hey, look, I'm very loyal to you. And this other firm has offered me this thing, and I want to talk to you about, do we want to have that function here? And they were like, well, the managing partner was, well, let me think about this. And I said, okay. So I remember that Ash Wednesday had happened or whatever, around that period, Mardi Gras, I think it happened, and I'd gotten this offer. And then I was waiting and waiting and waiting to hear from Stoll Reeves. And then Easter happened. And so I thought, well, that's some kind of period that's significant for a certain population on Earth. Not me, but, and so I thought, well, you know what? I haven't heard from Stoll Reeves, so I'm just going to go take this job. So I went off to a competitor and learned to do business development. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed bringing the background of being a lawyer into helping people with that warmth part and how to connect with customers, how to help them, how to learn about them, give them what they want, and have fun with them. I've always talked about happiness. It's been a big thing for me. I've been talking about it for years. It's really big and hot right now, but it's something I've always been into. Is be around happy people, make yourself as happy as possible doing what you do. So I love doing business development. Business development is also just customer service. That's all it really is. So that's that's what I was helping lawyers learn to do great customer service.
And there are so many examples that we could pick on of things that just sort of creative things that you did to build relationship. And we don't have time to talk about all of them, but there's two that I'd like to pick out. The clothing company is just one of my favorite stories. The way that you delivered that proposal. Give us a bit of background on that.
Well, that was just about the idea of somebody is coming to you and they're a clothing company. And instead of just giving them a dry proposal, why don't you put stuff in their terms? And so you go and you buy their clothing, you put the clothing onto people at the firm who are going to do the work, and you have them learn about their clothing, and then you take pictures of those people and you make up a little catalog about your legal services and mail it back to them just like it's one of their catalogs they send to their customers. So they read about what you can do. They see all these kind of semi-cheesy pictures of your associates and partners in their clothing, and at least they know you purchased all that stuff, And it's little things like that where you use the customer's product and you care about using their product, and you take time to understand their product. Before we did a pitch for a pizza company, I made sure that we ordered all the pizzas they sold and sat and ate them during one of our meetings, so that we knew and we could talk about our favorite pizza was such and such. If somebody says, have you been to my pizza place? And somebody says no, well, that's an interesting thing, And so just learning about the customer and learning about what they sell, doing it their way. They love hearing that. They love hearing it in their way, not your way. Yeah. They don't know how to judge. Most of them don't know how to judge the legal product. They know how to judge how you treat them.
Yeah. I really love that. It's understanding their business. And there was another example that we talked about with the silver, which was really fascinating, right? You're not necessarily a technical person by background, but you had a piece of work where there was some very technical stuff that you were going to talk about. Talk about what you did in that process, because again, I think that's a really great example. It's about building relationships, but it's also about demonstrating interest and understanding, right?
Exactly. So I was working on a silver lease, and that's kind of a strange thing. Somebody was going to lease $50 million worth of silver to put inside a facility, and it was a facility that made monoethylene glycol, MEG. And MEG is a precursor. It comes from oil and some other chemicals, PTA, et cetera. And then monoethylene glycol is, for example, 90% of what's in antifreeze, just for people. Most people have seen what antifreeze is. So this place that makes monoethylene glycol, this big facility in Texas, inside it has to be a bunch of silver that serves as a catalyst for the other things that come in to the facility. And so without the silver, you can put everything in, but without the silver being in that environment, monoethylene glycol won't come out. And what happens after a period of time, like let's say a year, 4% or 5% of that silver will degrade. And so you give less silver back. And so you lease the silver, and then you settle up on the silver spot price, that kind of thing. And so I wanted to understand, why do they need silver in this place? And so when we had the first meeting with the client, I didn't talk about law. I talked about chemicals and chemical reactions and catalysts. And the person who hired me liked it so much, he said, I'm really looking forward to the day when my lawyers can talk about catalysts and my engineers can talk about law. And that's it. You're speaking their language, not your language. Because the silver lease is a silver lease is a silver lease,
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, and we talked about this. That's something common that you would see in IP, right? You do in
Yes.
IP get that blend of sort of engineering backgrounds and legal and so forth. But in a transaction, not so common, right? So you're now differentiating yourself permanently in the mind of that GC because they will always remember that you were the lawyer that turned up, you had learnt about the process, and you were able to talk about that, right?
I think when we're both wearing, and people won't see this if they're not see the video, but we're both wearing kind of nice fancy white shirts today. And this reminds me of the time when I was a young associate and I was working on a lot of power plant transactions where our client Pacific Core was, in the business of generating and distributing power. And so I'd never been to a power plant. So I asked one of the partners, hey, I'm working on all these transactions. We're buying power companies. We're doing different things. And I just don't understand how it works. He goes, all right, why don't I send you down to southern Utah and you can go look at this plant and go check it out. There's a coal mine right there and a plant, and you'll have a tour for a day and you'll go do that. So I said, great. So I went there and I wore a white shirt, a really nice, expensive white shirt. And I thought I probably won't wear a tie since it's really hot and this is a power plant. But I came there and the people who gave me the tour, they started laughing. They said, hey, there's coal dust everywhere. We're going to open this stuff and take you in. This shirt's going to get ruined. And they were just cracking up. And I said, that's okay. I don't mind, but it was, again, just caring about learning about what it is that they did. After I had that tour, I was a much better lawyer for that client. And I could understand a lot more about what I was doing with the words in a document because I'd seen how power is generated and then where it goes and how it goes into wires and how it's not stored and travels around as electrons do. And so those are things that you just go and learn. Being curious makes you a great business developer.
Well, and that's it. You touch on another really interesting point, which is the idea of being proactive, right? How do you just not be a reactive lawyer? So how do you find opportunities to engage in a meaningful way? And I really like this idea of getting in there and living and experiencing their world because it gives you so much perspective. So when you're sat at your desk and you're thinking about, hey, what, I've got this client and what's going on in the world and those sorts of things, and knowing about how their business runs and the sorts of challenges that they might come into allows you to then go back to them and say, hey, I've just been thinking about this thing, like, what are you doing about that? And how can we potentially help you, right?
Yeah. And what you're talking to about is this connecting with people when you have the chance in unique ways. Can I tell you the refrigerator story? We
Yes,
talked about it
please.
briefly. This is one I love just because it's just funny. And that is, and I think it touches upon a lot of these things about having the guts to do something, trying funny things, just doing different things. So when I was at Lane Powell, I had befriended, as a director of business development, I befriended Mark Samuels, who's the vice chair of O'Melveny. We'd met at a pricing conference and really hit it off. And so there was a piece of work that involved O'Melveny's client Skechers, and the lawsuit was going to be happening in Oregon because Adidas was based in Oregon, and those were the counterparties, and Adidas was suing Skechers. So it was a huge lawsuit with trademark violations, blah, blah, blah. And this guy, Mark, he knows a bunch of people at Lane Powell, but he calls me one evening about getting this work because he knows me and he likes me, and I'm going to answer the phone. And he calls me and he says, hey, we'd love to hire your firm to be the local counsel. It's a huge matter. Look, sometimes local counsel is like just filing some papers and standing around. But he said, a lot of your lawyers can be involved, this, and it's going to be a massive matter and whatnot. I said, great. So I went and spoke to the lawyers and I said, sure, we'd love to do that work. Here's the partners that are going to work on it. Here are the associates. Here's the O'Melveny team. And he says to me, oh, we're going to bring about 15 of our people up there. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, And he said, yeah, I'm going to check with where we're going to go or that kind of thing. And they were thinking about these temporary office places and whatnot. Well, I knew we had some space at our law firm. And I said to myself, why don't I just invite him to house with us and just say, Mark, why don't you come and bring your whole team here? Now, I asked him before I asked anybody at my law firm. So somebody, because I thought some administrative person would have said, oh, wait, how are we going to do that? Because the first thing is like, well, wait a minute. What about the conflicts? What about the papers O'Melveny has? What about somebody from O'Melveny sees something Lane Powell is working on? All of those different kinds of things that are the problems. And I thought, I'll just ask him. And then I'll ask my boss, who was very cool, Chuck Riley, hey, does this work? He goes, sure. These guys show up to our law firm and they bring their lawyers. Mark is there, his team is there, and they bring a refrigerator. and this refrigerator, he says, can we bring this fridge? I said, sure. So they bring this huge fridge, and it's full of juices and power bars and snacks and different stuff. And they also brought tons of chips and things. And we had none of that stuff in Lane Powell, but we were like, what is all this stuff? So they came because they want their people to eat when they want, have fun, do different stuff. So all that stuff was happening. The work all occurred on the eve of trial. Unfortunately, for the legal fees, it's settled. And so, but they were happy. They were with us for a few weeks. It all went really well. And at the end of it all, Mark said to me, hey, do you mind if we leave the fridge? Because it's going to cost more to move the fridge than to even just have it, because had it, drop shipped there. And I said, sure. So that fridge is still at Lane Powell now.
That's
and the relationship at the end was, Mark wrote to the firm and he said, I really appreciate the work you all did for us, but what I really appreciate is that we were able to be there with you to do it. And so we never had to go somewhere and see them. They were happy. We gave them all the convenience they wanted. They didn't look to us at the end of this whole thing and say, wow, we were blown away by the acumen of Lane Powell's legal services. It's fine, but they're O'Melveny, okay? But they were like, they're so hospitable. No one has ever invited us to house with us before as a local counsel. That's what mattered to them. And that's relationship building. Mark will never forget that. I'll never forget that. And that fridge will never forget that either.
Yeah, it's interesting as you talk about that. I was thinking about the importance of relationship in winning business from law firms, and there are certain situations where your at bat matters. To use a baseball analogy, if you're a litigator, your at bat matters, right? That's a critical element that someone's evaluating in the decision that they make. But when it comes to the inner sanctum of protecting your business, right? Relationship, I think, is critical, right? You want people that you can trust, that you can engage with. And so these examples of how you build that solid relationship. And I really love this example between the two firms, because again, for some firms, a lot of their work comes from referral. And so, understanding how you build relationships with other firms and collaborate to get that work that's very special and niche to you, right? That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. The other thing too is, one some of the best things I've ever done is tell people, I don't think our firm is right for you for the work that you want to get done. And the best firm I've seen around is this. And this is one of my classmates. And some people at the firm would get mad at me and say, why didn't we take that work? I mean, it's such good work. I said, because we want it done perfectly for them. And these people are 3 times better at this than we are. What if they are happy with this? They'll give us other work. And that always happens because they know that you've got their back. And so that's something I'm really proud of, is not taking work and getting it to where it belongs.
Well, and as a salesman by trade, that is a huge relationship builder. And I had a similar scenario with a client that I inherited, who had he had taken he'd bought a product from the company that I was working for. They had tried for 2 years to deploy it, and it had been unsuccessful. And when I was handed the account, the general manager at the time said, I need you to get in there. I need you to restart the project because we need them to go live. So I went and I just sat and I listened. I said, look, I don't know you. We've never met. Let's just have a conversation. Let's talk about who you are, what you care about. Why did you buy the product? What was your experience? And all this kind of stuff. And we chatted for, I don't know, a good 2 hours at this point. And at the end of the meeting, I said to him, Simon, I would never have sold you this product because it isn't going to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. It will solve some of the other things, but the thing that you really care about, it's not going to solve that for you. But can I introduce you to another product? Now, this was a product that was fresh off the line. We had no clients at all. There was no referenceability for this product. And we talked about the product. I introduced him to it. I brought all of the right people in to have the conversation with him. And this was one of the next generation products of the company that I was working for. He signed a deal. He signed a 4-year deal because we built that trust. To your point, we built trust. We liked each other because we found some common ground, and enough trust for him on the back foot, because he's a CIO in a law firm. for a project that hasn't gone badly, it's gone well. So he's on the back foot with his partners, but he
Mm.
was able to go to the partners with confidence and say, hey, we did this, it doesn't, but this is the thing, and this is what we're going to do. And we were able to move forwards in that way. And so
And
that is important.
because you sell technology products, you know really well that a lot of things lawyers have purchased over the last 15 years or so haven't really worked very well for them. And systems have failed and things have happened because people have sold things to folks just to sell them, not to really follow through afterwards. And
Yeah.
you have the problem of information not going in properly into the system because certain partners are allowed to be protective and have poor behavior, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And so there's it's a challenge. And so I hope that we are buying products that work in the future and reducing our spend and spending it on better products and things that people are like, wow, this actually works. Let's buy more. And that's going to take some time because I think that there has been a lot of stuff at firms that are clunky and that just don't work. One thing, again, I like about what I've seen in your company, Databall, is that your product connects to many legacy products and improves them. And I love that because you don't have to say, get rid of all of this. Here's this new thing. It's like, just plug this on top of it and use everything you're working with. And that to me is the solutions we need for the future.
Well, and that's such an important point, right? You've been a partner in a law firm. You've had to use those systems day in, day out. And I think that is a common frustration for partners is the technology just it isn't great. It hasn't been great. It doesn't provide a good experience. I would say different potentially in the practice of law. I think the technology's there because in a lot of cases they get those technologies get built by people who have been
Mm-hmm.
lawyers and partners, and so
Mm-hmm.
they understand that challenge. But I think in the business of law, when we think about the administration, when we think about business development technologies, I think, you know, a lot of times it's people like me who haven't been in a law firm who are coming and building these solutions, and it's so important to think about that end experience of the partner. How is the partner going to engage? And I think it's one of the really interesting things, and a question for you, this idea of creativity and blending that with data. And how do you think about focusing, right? Your pizza example, your example of the clothing company, you can't do that for everybody. How do you start to figure out where you place your chips, in your opinion?
Right. You have to find, you have to have Kevin McMurdo, one of my old bosses, talked about the coalition of the willing. And I think you also have to start in places where people are willing to work with you and willing to think about crazy ideas or just think about how you might want to do something or and just say, yeah, let's try that out. So you're absolutely right. You can't always do a proposal that's just way out there, but you can find ways to help your lawyers learn about the company and then go to the prospect and show them something in their way. Like I said, I think there's a lot of ways to do that. Once I was working on a tire company, and I said, they sell tires and we're trying to get some of their work. We're going to deliver their proposal to them in one of their tires and and the person's going to go there with a tire and it's going to have a note in it saying that whether you use us or not, somebody who works in your company is going to get a set of these beautiful tires that we bought from your company because the other three are in my office right now. And whoever you want to give these tires to, whether you use us or not, we're going to give those tires to them. It could be somebody who's needy or whatever, and whether we get to work or not. Well, they love that, obviously, because the stuff came in a tire, and who wouldn't be talking about that in the office because they're judging firm A, B, and C. Now, firm C is just far better and they know it. They're going to go with firm C. But if A, B, and C are all kind of, somewhere around there, the firm that sent it in a tire is going to win.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true.
Someone will
Um,
say, where's the budget? Who's going to buy that tire? I said, I'll go buy it, I mean, let's just go buy it and see what happens, So
yeah, I
customer
love.
service is about tires too. There's a famous story about it. Nordstrom, which was one of our clients at Lane Powell. Somebody went to Nordstrom to return a tire, and Nordstrom didn't sell tires, but they took the tire anyway and gave the person the money because they want that customer.
Yeah, it's all about customer experience. It's so funny. I was talking to a guy who was head of legal at a large financial institution, and we were talking about we were sort of on this train of thought, and he was about to get the words customer experience out of his mouth in relation to the law firms that he used, and he stopped himself and he said, I can't use those words. We didn't get any customer experience from the law
Right.
firms that we worked with. Now, he worked for a very sizable financial institution doing very sizable legal work. And he made this really interesting comparison. He talked about the experience of working with a big four accounting firm around the audit. And he talked about this idea that the accounting firm would come in and they would do the audit every year. But at the end of the audit, they would spend somewhere north of 80 hours interviewing every single person who was involved in that audit. And they would generate a report of their findings. So this was good. This was what was good. This was what was bad. This is what we're going to do different next time. And they would take that document that would be signed off by everybody involved. And that would then form the basis of the discussions for the audit next year. And he made the comparison. He said, we'll do a massive litigation, billions of pick a currency, right?
You bet.
Nothing. Matter settles, everyone goes their own way, and they never heard a thing from any of the law firms that they walked with. No interest in understanding the experience, improving the experience, right? And I think, your examples are just so important as we move into this changing world where the clients expect more, they're looking for more engagement. Go and ask, how did we do? Like, what could we do better? That, coupled with building these meaningful relationships, is what will allow you to be successful as a partner, but also, I think, as law firms, as this world continues to evolve.
Yeah, isn't it sad that we have to use accountants as what we lawyers have to learn from? I mean, that's embarrassing. Future accountants are one of the few people that we could actually beat up in grade school and high school, So it's so depressing because I've heard this for years, about what accounting firms do. And you sit there and go, you've got to be kidding me, I want examples from technology that we can be doing. But God, accountants, we're done. They've already won their Tour de France. We're still working on that hill right now.
So, Sanju, you and I could talk for hours, and I've loved this conversation. So, I think to wrap up, we're going to have partners listening to this. We're going to have BD people. We're going to have legal technologists. What are 2 or 3 things that you would kind of leave behind to wrap up this session?
Well, I think one thing I've realized, and just since the time you and I have visited too, is that a lot of things just happen. And sometimes we think it's because of us, but I've been reading a little bit by this Stanford primate biologist that writes about determinism versus free will. A guy named Sapolsky. That's I think, and people can find him on YouTube or read his books. I think his newest book is called Determined, and really it's a lot about how things just happen, not because you did anything, but because they just happen. So you can get a lot of happiness in your life by just saying, I'm on this surfboard going on this ride, and not saying I'm a great surfer, and just saying, wow, this is awesome. Or I fell off the board and I'm going to get back up. And that's just how it is. It's connected a little bit to, I'm fascinated by this Scandinavian nomadic people called the Sami, S-A-M-I. That started because a DJ that came from England once brought some remixes of music with Sami people singing along with him. I thought, what is this stuff, And so I got interested in these people. And the Sami have this philosophy because they're nomadic. And sometimes they look at how do people in Stockholm or Oslo or Helsinki live, and we're so different. And there's tensions between these people. But the Sami live by this philosophy, which is let the reindeer decide. And they just let things happen. And so that's what I would really offer, which is that when you are able to just love yourself and be happy in yourself, you don't have to worry about whether people make more than you or less than you at a law firm. When I was a capital partner, I never ever looked at what the other partners made, because I knew the people deciding what I should make were smart people, and I trusted them. And that was it. I didn't have to get into the feeling of, oh, I'm 40,000 better than so-and-so, or how can they pay so-and-so 80,000 more than me? That's a freedom to be comfortable in that. A lot of it does relate to compensation, because a lot of people in firms and in business, they get their minds around money. And I think it's important to just step back and go, yeah, when I was in my first year working in business development at Lane Powell, the partner I was working for, the most of the management board, he said to me, he said, I would like to give you a bonus this year. We've done well of $100,000. And my base salary at that time was just $180,000. He said, I'd like to give you a bonus for $100,000. I thought that was way too much. That didn't make sense. And I didn't want a target on my back. The firm had done really well that year. He said, you've changed everything. I want to give you $100,000. Well, he'd shown me what people at the firm make. And a person, capital partners, bonus wasn't something like that as to their normal. And so I said, no, just give me 50. And he's like, are you sure? And I said, yep. And well, that got around that Sanju actually took less money than we offered that person. And you know what? That 50,000 today, X years later, I don't need it for anything. I'm comfortable. I'm with what I have. If I had it, I probably would have spent it anyway already on something or the other, maybe even a nicer shirt that I'm wearing. So, I feel like the freedom to just be comfortable with what you have, I think, is the most important thing I can offer. Be happy with what you have.
Do you think, just to kind of jump off that for a second, do you think by bringing that level of, I guess, simplicity to your life, you actually deliver better work? And in the end, you probably make the sort of money that you would make anyway, because you're just delivering a great experience, but there's less stress around doing it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just what's important to you. Absolutely. I was very lucky. When I was 17, I was quoted in Time magazine. I was at a conference of young kids called Century 3 Leaders, and it was a competition. And one guy was interviewing me, and he was talking about, you're one of the few people here who has long hair, and what do you think about all of this? And it was a very competitive environment. And I said to him back then when I was 17, the lead scholarship was for $10,000. And I told him, and he put it in Time magazine. I said, it's not worth it selling your soul for $10,000. I'm not going to say something in these meetings that evaluators are going to listen so I can be the winner of this thing, even if I know what to say, because it's just not worth it to me. If I'm going to get $2,000 just for having gone to this thing, that's good enough. That's enough for me to pay for such and such at Berkeley in my first quarter. And I'm very happy with that. So it's not worth it selling your soul. That's the thing. If you're happy doing what you do and you make 25 million a year, great. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. But you can be just as happy making $35,000 a year, really, as long as you're doing what you want to do. That's the key. Mortality helps us make great decisions, I think. If we were immortal, our decision tree would be very different. But mortality helps us, I think, come towards have a great life, enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Sanju, it has been fabulous talking to you for just under an hour. I can't wait to see you soon, and look after yourself. And yeah, we'll have a beer soon.
I really appreciate you having me on this. Thank you so much.
All right, Sanju. Thank you.
Bye.